Hello, this is Scott Montgomery with the Small Town Mercer. Today I'm going to bring you part four of my green energy project, and I want to show basically the um, common sense uh, end to the to what we're currently producing or what's currently being. God, I can't talk today. What's currently being proposed by the green energy people and why it's not sustainable. All right. So, first thing I did, I wanted to present an article. I wanted to do this on the computer, but I'm just going to save time because I want to try to shorten my videos more. I keep trying to do that, but I never quite make it. So, anyway, there was an article. I think the best article I found on this topic was from an agency called the Daily Angle, and it came out right around just after Christmas of 2020. So currently it's March of 2021, so it's fairly recent. And they were taking aim at the goal or the concept of making all vehicles on the road electric vehicles in the next 10 years. And how implausible that is. So every vehicle will be electric by the year 2025, the year 2030, or in California, the year 2035. And they said that just balderdash. It's not true, and it's not even feasible. And they put out a very compelling article, and I've known this for a long time, but I'm going to take a drink, excuse me. However, they actually gave some facts and some details to it, much more so than most of the other articles that I've read in the past. So these are three very compelling arguments, and I'm also going to show a video about that. Um, so the first reason is the cost. You know, the reader went to or the author of this article had noticed that he had gone to an electric charging station or whatever, and there was a Chevy Volt there. And he went and looked up, and he said the Chevy Volt costs about $47,000 currently. And a lot of middle income people just can't afford cars like that. They're very expensive to make. And so the cost of replacing everybody's car in the next 10 years is going to be astronomical. Not a lot of people, especially older people that don't drive a lot, or that have fixed income, or maybe people that are just not making a large income. Or let's say you have a family where one person is working and the other person is not. How are you going to fit all those people into a vehicle that they can't afford? You know, it's very difficult. But the main thing I want to focus on, the second and third reasons, these are the things that I've always focused on because they've always been true, and up to this point they're still true. And the second reason he said is mining, and this has always been a big issue. Um, most, and we're talking solar panels, windmills, and these electric cars with the battery. Okay, they use a lot of soft metals, rare earth metals, and some that aren't so rare, but a lot of soft metals to transport electrons. And you've got cobalt, lithium, copper, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so he did a study and he said in the United Kingdom alone, if you replaced every vehicle in the United Kingdom, you're going to use about 75% of the world's cobalt, lithium, so forth and so on, just to replace the cars in Great Britain. And we haven't even gotten to the United States yet, which has 9 times more vehicles. And so they're just, currently the amount of mines and reserves that are out there, you're not going to keep up with that kind of demand to make every car on Earth an electric vehicle. And like I argued in my previous video that I recorded, I think on Saturday, uh, well, I should say a couple days ago, or a fairly recent video. I think I recorded it on Saturday, but anyway, this is a timeless video, so Saturday doesn't mean anything to you, especially if this is 2 years from now and you're watching this thing. But regardless, in that video, I specifically pointed out that are you really saving the planet by putting all that dust in the air, putting the defunct parts in the ground, and poisoning the water system and the land system, and all to do what? To reduce the temperature 1/3 of a degree? I hate to say this, but I also mentioned in my video, and I've said this in the past, that we to get the Earth or the particles down to 280 parts per million of atmosphere. There's another video I was going to show that the guy claims that's essentially like putting Ayers Rock above every little city each time you increase it by a factor of 1. And that's true, but that dissipates. It doesn't stay there very long. And so, we had 280 parts per million, they say, hundreds of years ago. Great, but 1,000 years ago, the temperature was warmer than it is today. So, on Earth. So, is all this worth it? I doubt it. And I'm going to show another video that goes into that type of thing. So, anyway, that's another thing. You just don't have enough of it. And even so, I don't think you're really solving the pollution issue. You're just trading carbon dioxide for other pollutant issues. And remember, I'm going to show you a video how properly cleaning CO2 and uses for it, what that could be used for to benefit society, not just impose huge costs and boondoggle operations that really don't clean the planet. Thirdly, the batteries, they still don't have the life and the sustainable capacity. They're not sustainable and not nearly as consistent as fuels used in combustion engines. All right. And there's a lot of people out there in the green energy sector that want to push things like alcohol, ethanol and all that kind of stuff. Those are highly corrosive to engines, and I'm sorry, but your engine isn't going to last that long if you use stuff like that. Methane is also not that, it's obviously not. A lot of people would consider that a pollutant. So anyway, the video I was going to show you, his idea to reduce carbon is to have grasslands grazing and to replenish a lot of the portions of the earth that are dry and disparaged with grasslands and grazing animals. But I have another video here that also goes into that, and I'm going to show you that here now. So let me pot it up here. Then I'm going to end with a brief little news item. So let me turn this around and get this going here. See if I can turn that around so that it's facing you guys. All right, let me put it this way. There we are.
One other reason why greening the Sahara might be a bad idea, and it has to do with the Amazon rainforest. So yeah, while we talk about how transforming the Sahara could pull a lot of carbon out of the air, the Amazon rainforest is doing that right now. It's often called the lungs of the world because it produces so much oxygen, and it sequesters over 2 billion tons of CO2 into the ground every year. And these lungs have a not small case of human pneumonia. The Amazon rainforest is being cut down at an alarming rate. Over 11,000 square kilometers were deforested in 2020, which was the highest rate since 2008. But maybe it turns out one of the worst things we could do to the Amazon would be greening the Sahara. Because believe it or not, the Amazon kind of relies on the Sahara for nutrients. Because one of the things that makes the Sahara are the dust storms. With no plant life or vegetation to hold down the soil, winds just blow the dust all over the world. And some of that Saharan dust gets blown across the Atlantic. Now, this happens every year. Some years it's worse than others. Actually, in July of 2020, we had a massive Saharan dust storm that hit the United States. They called it a Godzilla dust storm because I guess we were looking for apocalypses around every corner in 2020. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. These same dust storms bring nutrients with them that deposit over the Amazon rainforest. Specifically, a lot of this dust is coming from the Beaujolais Depression near Lake Chad. Remember how I said that Lake Chad used to be much, much bigger? Well, the plants and the animals that used to live in that lake are now just mineral deposits in the ground, and those minerals contain phosphorus. Phosphorus is an essential element for plant growth, but it's actually kind of sparse in the Amazon rainforest. Plants and trees usually get phosphorus from the defoliating leaves that fall to the ground, but it rains so much in the Amazon rainforest that a lot of that gets washed away into rivers and sent out into the ocean. It's been compared to a slowly draining bathtub. But luckily, thanks to all those dust storms in the Sahara, over 22,000 tons of phosphorus gets dumped over the Amazon rainforest every year, which pretty much makes up the deficit. So the Amazon is being saved
by Megachad.
And we know that it's the dry conditions of the Sahara that make this possible thanks to NASA's Calypso satellite. Satellite data from 2007 to 2013 show that there is a direct correlation between the amount of dust going across the Atlantic to the amount of rainfall that occurred in the Sahara and the Sahel the year before. When rainfall increased, the amount of dust traveling the next year decreased. So yeah, transforming the Sahara would probably have drastic effects on the Amazon ecosystem. But still, regardless, the Sahara is still expanding, and this has dire consequences for millions of people living in the Sahel. A study published in the Journal of Climate in 2018 said, quote, "The Sahara Desert has expanded significantly over the 20th century by 11% to 18% depending on the season, and by 10% when defined using annual rainfall, with the desert's borders encroaching into agricultural areas in Chad, Mauritania, and Sudan. This is what the Great Green Wall is being meant to fight against." The study blamed climate change, but specifically the way climate change is affecting other weather patterns, including the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation and the Hadley circulation. These weather patterns work in 60 to 80-year cycles of warm and cold phases, but if you really want to see the Sahara go green and you're patient enough, just wait, because that African humid period, it will return. It's actually caused by a precession in the Earth's orbit and has come and gone many times throughout Earth's history. But you might want to get cozy, because it's probably going to take a couple 100,000 years. So yeah, terraforming the Sahara actually is probably not a great idea. I guess you could say the scientists in these studies were so busy wondering whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. But exploring this topic isn't just fun, it also helps to reiterate just how connected we all are on this weird, big, wet rock. So let's hope those old school land management techniques do the trick to keep the Sahara from expanding any further. It may turn out those people from thousands of years ago really knew what they were doing. And they were pretty decent painters. But hey, if nothing else, the Sahara is an amazing landscape with a clear sky. Might be a great place to get some nighttime photographs, so if that's something you might be into, I can recommend the class Nightscapes, Landscape Astrophotography on Skillshare. Taught by photographer Ian Norman, this class will help you find the right locations for shooting dark skies.
All right, I'm going to leave that there for now. Back to me. Okay, so I didn't want to play the whole video because basically there's that strip, the Sahel, which is that strip between the green vegetative part of Africa and the Sahara Desert. And that used to have plant life. And so it turns out that there's been several people. I met a person here in Virginia who has a company, and what they do is they pump or put carbon dioxide that they store, and they turn it into fertilizer. And when the native grasses that used to be in that area that are now dying out, if you can irrigate them, get them started, and just leave them alone for a while and let them just grow, what they do is the grasses form up, and there was another video guy proposing that in Australia as well, because there's a lot of similar lands there that are in between desert and vegetative. And so what they would like to do is once you get those grasses started, it'll regenerate the rain cycle, and as he pointed out in that video, that will return again to Africa. So, and as well as Australia. So when you do that, it will generate more rainfall, And then you have animals come in and graze there, and they keep the grass down, but they don't return right away. They don't return for several months or maybe even 2 or 3 years if it's a large enough rain. It turns out in Africa it could be 3 to 5 years before they return again. So that was the proposal. So CO2 collected, remember I mentioned in my video a couple of days ago that we have devices that can collect CO2. As a matter of fact, I had a video potted up here. Now I got to go back. Okay, where is it? There it is. Right here. So there it is. So let me show you
This
that.
beanie hat protect my head from harmful 4G and 5G cell phone radiation.
Congratulations.
This episode is brought to you by Brilliant. Click the link in the description below. The progress we've made recently with the adoption of renewable energy is encouraging, especially now that the effects of climate change are becoming more noticeable. But renewables alone aren't enough to lower carbon emissions at the rate that's needed. What if we could stop carbon emissions from entering the atmosphere in the first place by capturing it from pollution sources like coal-fired power plants or a cement factory?
Or
And then
green
storing it
energy
underground, or better yet,
plants.
finding a use for it. Well, we can do that with carbon capture utilization and storage, or CCUS. And it's not a new concept, but it's been slow to take off. Until now, that is. Numerous carbon capture facilities are being planned and built worldwide, so we could see this technology become much more common. But do we really need it? How much of an impact can it really make? And is it just really an excuse for burning more fossil fuels and letting heavy polluting industries off the hook? It's time to find out the truth. I'm Matt Farrell. Welcome to Decide.
I'm going to fast
The
forward.
transition has to be a gradual process, which means we're going to be stuck with some of the non-renewable sources in our energy mix for a while, no matter what we do. But that doesn't mean we have to let these industries carry on polluting at dangerously high levels. With CCUS, we can continue to burn oil and gas without having to worry about all those nasty emissions. Doesn't sound too bad, right? And doesn't it remove the pressure to make big changes right away when we can just bury it all underground for a while until we figure out the best way forward? Well, one of the criticisms of CCUS is that it gives some industries and governments an excuse to do very little at a time when it's critical that we take action to address climate change. Despite that, this is a technology that we do need to start taking more seriously. In fact, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, has labeled CCUS a necessity rather than simply an option for keeping climate change under control. Alongside renewable technologies and new energy storage solutions, it looks set to become one of the main weapons in this fight. It's not hard to see why. It's estimated that 90% of the emissions generated by large-scale industrial processes can be captured, so it can actually be very effective. It works best in these situations where high concentrations of CO2 are present. At coal-fired power stations, it's thought to be possible to capture at least 800,000 tons of CO2 per year, whereas natural gas plants, which produce less CO2, can offer around 400,000 tons of extractable CO2. This is done by filtering out the CO2 from the flue gases using special solvents before it enters the smokestack. Another process involves sucking up carbon dioxide that's already in the atmosphere through what's called a direct air capture, a form of negative emissions technology. While it may sound like an advanced concept, CCUS has been going on for some time. The idea for the first carbon capture plant came back in 1938, but the first major project to involve burying CO2 underground didn't take place until 1972 in Texas.
Okay, I'm going to stop that there. And I'm going to move up here. There we are.
Science Agency have discovered a CCUS method that they claim sets new standards in efficiency. It involves using small amounts of cutting-edge materials called metal organic frameworks, or MOFs, which have incredibly large surface areas. An MOF is a crystalline compound of metal ions that behaves a bit like a sponge filled with tiny magnets, and it has unusual porous properties. Its low energy cost is achieved via an absorption process that's similar to heating an induction cooktop to reduce the overall energy required. The Australian scientists have made their own unique, highly absorbent material using MOFs that can regenerate extremely quickly, as well as use very little energy, which they say will make it a relatively cheap method, and they're aiming to be capable of capturing CO2 directly from the air in the future. While there's still work to be done to iron out the issues, and we have yet to see it reach its full potential, carbon capture, utilization, and storage surely has some part to play in our battle against climate change. More governments and corporations are getting on board.
All right, let me stop it there. Okay, back to me. So that's a proper use for it, right? So now if you want to play the carbon game, and we're all going to die of climate change in the next week or so, fine. Then you find projects that are profitable and that have a use in industry. Now, this is going to be costly, but again, you can use the CO2 as a product. I've already shown in a previous video and have explained that you can use it to get more oil out of the ground and get more natural gas out of the ground, especially in difficult areas. But you can also use it to regenerate plant life in those areas of the earth where grasses have been sparse for, several decades now, like that part of the Sahara or in Australia, or even in the grassy lands that used to inhabit like places like New Mexico or West Texas, parts of Arizona and Utah that used to be a little more green than they are now, and other areas. So, as well as other parts of the world that are like that. So anyway, that's the proper use for carbon capture and storage. So yes, so we can stop having the ridiculous argument about the Earth's going to die next year or next week, and it's too late and it's irreversible and all that. Well, if you put enough plant life out there, regenerate some of these areas, as well as clean up whatever carbon dioxide excess you have, then even by their science standards, you are going to return the Earth to 300 parts per million or 400 parts per million, or even 280. Now, again, I happen to agree with Princeton University. If you don't have too much carbon dioxide, you have just enough, then that helps plant life. That doesn't kill off society and kill off the animals and put the Earth in a dire situation where it's too cold to sustain any kind of life form. So I'm going to end with this. Remember I had mentioned that put this here. Stop it. All right. Remember I had mentioned...
Ever told. When I read that, I interpreted it.
Oh, I got the wrong one now. Ugh. I hate these things. I always screw up.
Can this
All right.
beanie hat
Stop it.
protect my head from harmful 4G and...
All right. Here it is right here. So let me pull this up. Remember I had mentioned...
So tell us what the supply looks like right now.
All right, let me stop that there. So remember I had mentioned that there's not a lot of supply. There's supply issues with the batteries and the photoelectric cells and all that. Remember I said in Great Britain earlier in this video that that we're going to have using 75% of all the earth minerals to supply just all the cars in Great Britain. Never mind anywhere else on the planet. All right. Well, here's Elon Musk's company. And this is just a little blurb, and I'm going to end my video with this, and I'll just put this out here.
Are we in a massive crunch? And given the fact that, we're headed towards a post-pandemic world, we're seeing the cold snap affecting most of the United States and, the need for uranium increasing. And as you said, this EV revolution that will need uranium. So what does the supply situation look like right now?
I think the best way to describe it would be fragile. The supply situation is not quite yet at that point where it's an extreme crunch right now, but it's just around the corner, and in my opinion, it's unavoidable. So right now, all of the uranium in the world that's being produced is essentially coming from Kazakhstan and Australia, and a bit from Uzbekistan. Maybe a little bit from Russia, but there's basically nothing coming out of the States. There's currently nothing coming out of Canada, which has historically been a huge uranium production jurisdiction. Both McArthur River and Cigar Lake, Cameco's two biggest mines, the two biggest mines in the world, are both closed at the moment. So we have supply coming from only a few sources, which makes it very fragile, and demand that's just consistent and rising.
So Justin, right now the spot price of uranium trading around $27.50 a pound. We were talking offline, and you mentioned the all-time high was at 134 back in 2007. So
I'm gonna push it back now.
Away from the alt.
I think that it's adding to the overall story for sure. The trend is clear with EVs, and anybody who knows anything about electrical grids and the need for a vastly expanded electrical grid to support the huge uptick in electric vehicles and electrification of essentially everything understands that baseload energy is important. And the great thing about nuclear energy is that it's a consistent, reliable baseload energy that's also carbon emission free. And that is gaining traction amongst the ESG investment community, for lack of a better word, with the environmental left, with the entire green agenda. We're even seeing, the political left accepting nuclear energy as a green energy source, which is a huge development. And so, to the extent that electric vehicles will continue on this trend, it only makes sense that nuclear is a major part of that mix to provide the energy for that.
So tell us what the supply looks
All
like.
right. So we went over that. So that's what I'm talking about. So now Elon Musk says he wants nuclear to supplement the battery charging. That's what it was. So, but the problem is what? As I played for you before, I went back to that. There's not enough of that either. So, we're going to have issues with the green energy. I know they want to save face, and I know they want to keep with the doomsday, the earth is dying stuff. And I honestly, I'm tired of arguing with them. Go ahead, do all this stuff, but it has to be profitable and it has to be sustainable. And right now, wind and solar are not sustainable. They're not profitable. They're way too expensive. They're way too involved. And when these things break down or wear out or whatever, you put them in the earth, they pollute and poison. The mines poison. Mining this stuff in general poisons it, and there's not enough of it. So, as the other video said, that if you put all these windmills and electric vehicles and all this, you're going to run out of all of those mining supplies before you even get to half of the earth. So then the other half of the earth is going to have to burn coal and oil. So you might as well just go ahead, keep using the fossil fuels and the coal and what have you, and clean it up. And then use the other stuff as a supplemental energy source. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. So anyway, that's my video for today. I thank you for, it was kind of a back and forth, I had all it planned out, but I flubbed it all up, I guess. But, again, these videos are only here for one reason. I'm not here to entertain and have slick videos. I'm here just to get information out. And that's all I'm doing. So thank you for watching, and I'll have another video out in a couple days. So blessings and have a wonderful day. This has been Scott Montgomery of the Small Town Mercer.